Good afternoon. Oh, it's always a bit nerve-wracking to know when I'm actually live, but I am live. Hello. Erin and I are popping on this afternoon to talk all about sisterhood wounds, witch wounds, and how they're impacting us in this modern world still. Hello. I'm just going to get Erin on. It's nice to see people live. I love doing this for that fact. So then there's people on. Here we go. Erin. I'm in my clinic space this afternoon, but the opposite end is not the nicest view. Here we go.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. It's nice to see your face.
You too. We did it.
Yeah, we did it again. For the we're gonna make this a thing every fortnight. Monday.
Yeah.
Monday for us to just talk about all the things that we talk about anyway. We might as well have a chat about it.
Yeah.
And people can watch what we chat about. It's literally what we talk about in private, right?
Right. Exactly.
So we're just gonna have a bit of a casual chat about sisterhood wounds, and I think I want to be like really specific when we talk about any kind of like wounding. We're not talking about it from a place of like you've got this broken thing and it needs to be fixed, you know. Like I don't believe that healing is like we don't need to be healed. We're all whole and we're all not broken and we're all perfect as we are. And the wounds that we talk about, I suppose it's difficult with words because we need to find words that fit the feeling that we're trying to express.
They're opportunities.
That's right. So when we talk about wounding, I suppose what we're talking about is these opportunities to go deeper in our in acknowledging what is present for us, to go deeper in our stories, deeper in our lineage, go deeper in our embodiment, to go deeper into what we're here for and what we're here to serve. And you know that Rumi saying of like a quote that's like wounds are the places that let the light in.
The cracks.
Exactly.
The cracks.
The cracks. Right. Just a coming back to ourselves and a shedding of layers. Yes, thank you, Beck. Exactly. So when we're talking about wounding, we're not talking about something that you have to go out like think that there's something broken that you have to fix. It's just that we get to acknowledge that there's these parts of us that we get to, that are opportunities for us to see more and go deeper, and like yay, because we get to have these beautiful experiences that support this ongoing journey of like wholeness and fullness. So when we talk about healing, we're really just talking about embodiment and wholeness, coming back to wholeness and truth. So that's how I start.
Yeah. And I just want to say as well, opportunities for evolution and not something to be like victimized by.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Because we can do that as well. We can be like, oh, well, you know, it's not an excuse for poor behavior, or, you know, well, I'm just like this because of X, Y, and Z. It's, noticing that pattern. Perhaps I react in this way because of X, Y, and Z. And so there's a potent opportunity here for me to excavate and, you know, find the gold and alchemize and
yes,
expand.
And that's really what we're here for, right? This alchemization and like knowing maybe a little bit more, a bit different than our ancestors did. And so being able to, or we have more opportunities to kind of look at these things. So we get to do things differently. So that evolution is going, well, we know better, so we can do better. Exactly. Not an excuse. Like it's not an excuse. Well, I've got sisterhood wounds, so I'm going to be really nasty and bitchy, right? Like, no. Yeah, not being victimized by things that have happened in the past. And I think that's what we really want to talk about, is this idea that is thrown around a lot in spiritual spaces of sisterhood wounding and witch wounding, and what is that, and how do we not be victimized by that, and how can we actually find the power and the responsibility within ourselves to create more positivity, you know, and more, when we talk about healing, yeah, like more wholeness and more truth and more beauty, which is really what sisterhood healing is all about. Do you have anything to add on that?
No, I reckon we just get into what they are and how they differ, and yeah, where they came from. I think there's a lot of confusion around sisterhood and witch wounds as well. Yeah, so we'll just like clarify first.
This is a really big topic, right? It's a really big topic that we cannot really condense into 60 minutes. And, you know, 60 minutes is still a long time. We can't condense it, which is why this is the basis and the framework of all the work that we do. And a lot of the basis of like the work that our teachers do as well. So we'll briefly kind of go over, like the history and what they are, and then kind of explain where you can find out more, because it is such a big topic. So I kind of posed this as like specifically centered around sisterhood wounding and sisterhood wounds and what that looks like and how that presents. But we can't really talk about just sisterhood wounds if we don't also mention HERstory and witch wounding. So I suppose like in modern time, the way that sisterhood wounding presents is pretty standard, like how stereotypical of like women and mean girls and how we expect, you know, and I put it in these because it's this expectation of how, well, women just are that way. And when we actually look at that and we go, well, is that really how women behave innately? Where did that come from? That's where the opportunity to go deeper and to excavate and to alchemize the traumas and the experiences of the women that have gone before us, and kind of pave a new way and go, well, we can see that this is what happened. We can see this is where this started. And this is actually what we want now. We want something different. We get to know better, so we get to do better. I was also going to say, like, sometimes it can be really like triggering and uncomfortable. And these triggers and that discomfort is actually the greatest opportunity and message that it wants to be felt, like it wants to be witnessed. And so it might be uncomfortable, and like we embrace that. So where did it all begin? We were talking about this a little bit before.
Yeah, so I guess like we can go back like 9,000 plus years ago when we were living in matrilineal societies where it was a real tend and befriend, women coming together because we were the life growers, the life givers. We tended the land. It was like goddess worshipping cultures where for survival, we really did all work together and love each other very deeply. And, you know, the menstrual cycle was honored, and we would retreat every dark moon and receive potent messages that we would bring back to the community. And then if you fast forward a few thousand years, you know, to around like 3,000 to 4,000 BC, when the Bronze and Iron Ages started, and all of a sudden we could build and wield these pretty forceful, gnarly weapons, then things began to kind of shift, and you know, people started worshipping like singular male gods, and used those gods like as an excuse to go in and tear apart basically the matrilineal communities and the goddess worshipping societies. And what they realized pretty quick smart was that as soon as you divide and conquer the women, and especially like the elderly grandmothers, you know, the wisdom keepers, the wisdom holders, the more successful you are at doing that, the more successful you are at completely decimating community, which you can then go in and take and, you know, pillage and kind of do whatever you want to with. And then around 1000 BC, so a couple of thousand years after that, we saw the rise of religion, like the Christian kind of religions. And then they went in and over the top of any kind of like remnants of goddess worshipping societies, they placed their own singular god worshipping shrines, temples, churches, and it all just kind of like progressively went downhill from there. And then it all kind of culminated with the witch trials, which was the, you know, depending on which book you read, the 400 to 600-ish years of the burning of the witches. And so, you know, we've been in this collective experience pattern of this energetic for thousands of years. And I really do believe, like Rosie said, like the goddess is returning. We're evolving out of that, and many, many different ancient civilizations and even like modern technologies back up the fact that we are in a huge era of change and evolution, where those patterns are starting to be dismantled, and all of the systems and structures that serve them and prop them up are slowly starting to crumble. And we are entering in like a new era, which I have like so much faith in. I don't know if we'll see it within our lifetime, but we've got to have the faith. Like, I know it's coming, where we're coming back to deeply respecting the feminine and you know, a more kind of matrilineal, supportive way of life. And you know, and so under that as well comes colonization, right? We can't forget about that. So, you know, if you didn't have direct ancestors or like European heritage who experienced kind of directly in your matrilineal line or your DNA, the witch burning trials, that you've experienced this horrific energetic pattern of go in, like decimate, take what you can, you know, change everything, leave your mark, you know, like claim your territory. Like we all carry this at some sort of level, whether that's, you know, in a cellular level in our DNA from our matrilineal line, which this is all passed down through, or whether you've lived it in past lives. I see like so many past lives pop up when people are on my table, where they've either been the persecutor or the persecuted. And so like this energetic pattern has just been playing out for truly like millennia, and it has led us, which you can go into now, Catherine, like it's led us to where we're at with these ways that we behave in relation to each other, which we're kind of terming like the sisterhood / witch wounding.
Yes. Erin's so good with the history, because I'm always like, oh, sometime in that time. Erin's good with the history. And what I want to say is, when we talk about like patriarchy and colonization and things like that, it's not like feminine versus masculine or like anti-men. It's like the patriarchy is an institution, not a bunch of men, you know, like it's this patriarchal institution. And we're not saying like it's like the feminine versus the masculine. It's like the masculine and the feminine work together. They're actually energies. So like separate any kind of identity or anything, work together, and the earth works in harmony in that way. And originally, so it was basically 3 key weapons, I suppose, that they used, which was first disconnection. So it was disconnecting women from each other and disconnecting everybody from the earth. Like that was the first thing. And then it was fear through the witch trials, so making everyone afraid of each other. And through religion, they brought that fear, fear of God, fear of punishment. Like this cultures didn't have that same, like you're going to be punished if you're a bad girl, which is kind of filtered through. And then it So with the rise of them, so as the patriarchy rose and religion rose, so did the medical institution. And the medical institution brought all this shame, body shame, menstrual shame, birth shame, you know, rites of passage, all of that. And so as soon as we became ashamed of bodies, we lost that connection. And then we get this disassociation from our bodies, and then we can no longer feel our bodies, and then we abandon ourselves and we start to numb, or we start to just not be able to feel what it is we want, and we just do what people tell us to do. And then the trauma of all of that, you know, throw in there the colonization that then came kind of during that time as well, and it's just this kind of constant. And then we wonder why today it's this constant need for extraction. Like, extraction is so glorified. If you look at business, if you look at, like, you can only get ahead if you step on other people, or we can only
mining, extracting from the earth.
Exactly. The earth is, it's like, oh well, it doesn't matter, like, we'll just take what we want, it doesn't matter. And the way that we treat the earth is such a mirror for how we treat ourselves as a species, as a human, particularly the mothers, you know, because the mothers have this big imprint on the babies. And you can see that for all of that time, the imprints that have been handed down from the separation and the trauma and the fear, and that just gets handed down. And shame and fear are not, like, innate to us. Like, sure, in these older generations, I'm sure that they had times where they were afraid and they were maybe nasty to each other, but I think we've just carried for so long. And women particularly, the reason that we talk about women and we work with women in this way is that women carry the epigenetic, what is it called? I always forget the name.
The mitochondrial DNA, like the red thread, how it, like, these events literally alter our DNA and then it's passed down. So we're like, it's within the fabric of our makeup. So we can have not, in this human incarnation, we can have not experienced directly, you know, being like war-torn, raped, pillaged, but it's literally in our DNA. So, and the energetics of that affects the way that we move and breathe and live in the world.
And if it hasn't been processed, what I see on my table a lot is a lot of women have this, like, stagnation in their wombs, and then it's coming out as menstrual issues. Like, we're seeing menstrual issues as, like, and pathologized menstrual issues on, like, a mass scale, and infertility. And one of the contributing factors is, like, this pass down of this matrilineal trauma that gets stagnated in the womb, and all the shame around our bodies and our menstrual cycle. And that's just the first thing, and you can see how it all ripples out. So when it's hard to talk about sisterhood wounds without talking about the and all of that which comes for us. And so being able to be aware of that and kind of see where that comes from. And this is why we talk a lot about knowing your lineage and kind of knowing a bit about the history. I mean, it doesn't always have to be. You can also, you know, consider past lives if that comes into your life in some way, or just kind of knowing the land on which you lived on, the kinds of things that happen on that land, and the sorts of traditions that were taken away and then turned into some other, you know, Christian holiday, or, you know, something else, can be really important to coming back to connection. So when we talk about sisterhood wounds and we talk about healing, the first step is, like, us reconnecting to ourselves, coming back to our bodies. The biggest thing that I see is women not living in their bodies, living completely external from their bodies, and not even really realizing, living completely separate and external from the earth, and, you know, running and extracting from themselves and extracting from everywhere else because that's what we're told to do. Do you have more to add on that?
No, I was just going to say, Hayley's just said that she sees it in her sessions a lot, as I said as well, like, men, women, it doesn't matter. And Emma said, like, shame is cultural. 100%. It's taught. It's inherited. It's, like, bombarded into us from every direction since the moment we pop out, because shame sells. it makes us malleable, it disconnects us, it makes us feel not enough, unworthy, needing to like externalize everything, hand our power over, fix me daddy. It's all that sort of stuff. Yeah, totally.
And that's how like the pharmaceutical companies and the medical industry, I'm not saying there's not a need for like the medical system, you know, there still serves like a useful purpose, but the way that it came in, and, you know, women with their hysteria and being sent, you know, after the witch wounds, like more as it became more modernized society, you know, we still were sending women to mental institutions for, you know, all of us. I think this is why we're so passionate about, all of us would have been burnt at the stake as witches, sent to mental institutions because we can like connect with, you know, voices in our head. All of that would have impacted us so much. And so that's why it's important for us to talk about it now while we have a voice, while we can not be punished in that way. It's important to talk about these things, because if it wasn't us in a past life, it was our ancestors being impacted. Where do we think that we got this stuff from, you know? But yeah, and then it really impacted the menstrual cycle and birth. And when you and death, you know, when you interfere with these rites of passage, particularly birth, then you interfere with that really first attack. And instead of women feeling like it was their experience, it became externalized and pathologized. And then that's the pattern that gets imprinted furthermore. So that's kind of where we're at the moment.
Yeah. Happy days.
But these weren't like this. These patterns are not. We're not going to be victimized by them, and we don't have to like own them, right? Like now we get to just acknowledge them and witness them and feel them. And for a lot of women, when they first learn about these things, there's a lot of grief. There's a lot of oh, now I can see where this came from, or now I can see why I acted in that way. And I suppose the ways that this shows up, the most common ways that it tends to show up, and I see sort of sisterhood wounds and witch wounds slightly different, but very connected. The sisterhood wounds is really this idea that women are inherently bitchy, you know, oh, high school girls are just nasty, and, you know, girls are just mean and gossip, you know, and women just gossip. And it's like our friend Beck posted something the other day, and it was nourished women don't bitch. Like if you're connected within your system and you feel safe in your own system, why would you ever feel the need to tear someone else down? Like if we feel an ability to hold, like if we have capacity to hold uncomfortable emotions, uncomfortable conversations, then we can just have the conversations instead of talking to people behind their back. So it tends to show up in judgment, in competition, like women having to compete against each other. It shows up in like constant comparison. It's like that real externalization, like I'm not good enough, and so I compare myself. My body's not good enough. You know, I need to study more and do more all the time, achieve more. It shows up in gossip. It shows up in fear, like this real lack of safety, that I've been hurt by other women before. I'm safer with men. And they're the main ways. And then the witch, sorry, go.
No, it's totally fine. I was just going to say, I feel like we've like missed a step here in just explaining that. So the reason that a lot of these programs and patterns are passed down is because during these thousands of years of kind of like repression and vilification of women, we were divided, like made to turn on each other. Like you'll live if you can dob in all of these other women, you know. And we were like, it wasn't safe to be, and it wasn't safe to be together. And because we were encouraged to do all these horrendous things to each other, those are like, that's how it's kind of like playing out now. Does that make sense?
Yes. And this idea safer to be, so the big thing for the witch wounds as well is that it's safer to be part of the majority. Even if they're doing horrible things, I'm safe if I just like pretend to be part of that, like pretend that I'm, you know, not an introvert and can't speak to spirit or whatever. Like just pretend like I don't work with the plants and I don't do any of that, because if I'm that, then I'm at risk of being killed and my family's at risk of being killed. And I suppose in our culture, like now, that's like cancel culture and things like that. But in some cultures in the world, still, you're still punished for those things.
Yeah,
and
sorry. Emma's just written the Mummy Wars. Like that is such a prime example. And like just simple things, like even I remember when I was like a first time mum and was doing like the co-sleeping feeding on demand, and I would go to some mums groups who would like just fully talking about all their sleep training and you know, how they were like feeding like on the clock, and I didn't speak up because I felt shame that I wasn't doing it the same way as them. And I'm not saying that any way is right or any way is wrong. It's just they're different. But I was too scared to say that I was doing these things that were perhaps against the norm. And they were like, the Mummy Wars is the worst. There's like so much judgment, so much shame. It's just so gross.
And the comparison to like, but it comes back to that thing of if you're part of, if you just bland yourself out, pretend like you externalize, completely disassociate from your needs, abandon your own needs and just join. It's kind of like alcohol, you know, like alcohol's so popular. It's like you're weird if you don't drink as well. You know, maybe not so much now, but it's easier, it's safer to be part of the majority than to be different. And that really comes from that witch wound stuff. And that's where that sort of shows up in like people who choose to stay in or to stay in work or in environments that they really hate, and they would rather abandon themselves than be authentic and honest and true to who they really are, what's calling them, because it's scary, because, you know, then people might turn against them. And I guess it depends on the environments that you're in. But like, it is scary as a mum to like, be different. And I think the more people that speak up, the more kind of difference becomes normalized and you find your people. But the other thing about judgment is that generally people don't want to be abandoning themselves. And judgment is really just an unmet need, an unmet desire within yourself that you're not in approval of. And so you're judging somebody else because really you just want to be like not looking at the clock and, you know, potentially co-sleeping or like not having to get up to go to work or not having to go to a job that you hate, but you're too afraid to be different or be, you know, shamed or whatever. And so that's kind of, yeah, where it plays out. Women were separated in so many ways and had to dob each other in to keep themselves safe, to the point where some of the villages literally had no women left. And they even like, I mean, they also tortured men and also children, but, you know, it really was a women dominant trauma that happened, that targeted, you know, the midwives and the intuitives and the herbalists and the people that we consider kind of the spiritual types now. So that's a lot. We're carrying a lot.
Yeah, and it can. You just reminded me actually of it just popped into my head because when you said, you know, because the women who held the knowledge of how to walk beside someone as they found their own power and sovereignty were the ones who were targeted, right? And so we see the witch wounds and the sisterhood wounds play out almost at a magnified level in midwifery, in kind of like spiritual healing circles. And I remember when I went to collect my first placenta ever after I was certified in placenta encapsulation, and I got to the hospital and I got out of the car and I had my esky and I was just hit with this irrational terror. Like, I kid you not, it was like I started shaking and I was like, I felt like I was doing the most illegal thing in the world, like going to this institution which was, you know, I mean, it's an unregulated industry, and like, you know, ferrying and processing organs isn't your standard kind of thing. But the fear that I felt about walking into this hospital and knowing that I would have to like interact with very system integrated people, it was really scary for me. And so I just had to stop, and I was like, what is this fear about? Like, the level of this fear, like, I felt like if I got caught, I literally would be like killed or something. So I had to go through all that. And what is hilarious upon reflection is it's the only time that I've ever been questioned by a midwife. It's the only time. And I feel like it was almost like a test, kind of, you know, the universe was like, well, this is what you're here to do for however long you're going to do it in this life. And so we're like going to really test you here. And so that I ended up having to speak with like the head midwife. So I went there and I met with the dad, and the dad's like, they won't give me the placenta until you come and speak to the midwife. And I was like, what? And so I was like, shit. So I went in and I spoke to one midwife, and she was like, I'm going to have to go get the head midwife. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is outrageous. And she vilified me. Like, she questioned me on everything. And luckily I had all of the answers. She was like, you know, are you certified? And like, now I would be like, none of your business. Like, we've signed the release form. I don't work for you. I don't have to answer any of your questions. Like, I'm serving my client, go away. But I went through everything. She was like, how do you dispose of any of the organ that's left over, and, you know, potential bloodborne pathogens and that. And I answered, like, I was like, pew, pew, pew. I had all of the answers, but my heart was pounding, and I was like, I'm going to get done. I'm going to get burnt for this.
What?
It was hilarious.
So valid. God. I remember that. I was like, I've never been asked it by anyone, and you just like got it. You just got the grilling.
I got the bloody grilling, and it felt like I was on trial. Like, it was full on. I survived. I didn't get burned.
You survived. And imagine what you healed for that. You just like burnt all this like healing through. You just did the thing. But that's the thing, and that's why a lot of people do feel really nervous moving into this sort of work, this sort of like, how do I explain what I do, and how do I, you know, do this work while we're kind of walking. I always call it like fringe dwelling, but we're very much threshold walking, and we're kind of got a foot in two worlds, and we're sort of still figuring out what that looks like to bring this work back into this modern world. And we don't have the elders, like, we don't have the storytelling that we used to rely on. We don't have the intergenerational communities that we used to have. And I think particularly as mothers, I know as I stepped into motherhood, that's what I really craved the most, is like, where are the old, like, kind of tell us how to do this. And I think what's fueled me a lot is like, well, I'm just going to become an old lady that like supports, you know, the next generations. And that's really all we can do. There's something else I was going to say on that, but I can't remember. But yes, it happens. I think that's that witch wound stuff that really shows up on a visceral level. Like, your heart was pounding and you were sweating and you were like, what even is this? And so for some people that's too much. The fear of that is still too much, and so they stay in work that they don't really want to be doing, or abandoning themselves.
It's even like, I find it even shows up in like, I speak with a lot of women who are like turning back to herbs, and there's this real underlying thing of, as well, like, I don't want to get it wrong, and I don't know enough, and like, what if I fuck it up, and it's like, who cares? Like, we're learning on this path. Like, we're gonna get stuff wrong. Like, you get things wrong in life all the time. Why are you so specifically nervous about getting this piece wrong? And it's because this piece is like a part of that, you know, the wise woman wisdom that is coming back and reintegrating that we were literally killed for practicing.
And this is also the biggest reason why I'm so passionate about us revillaging and having communities, particularly if we do this kind of work, because for two reasons. The first thing is, like, when you had that experience, you could message me and be like, oh my God, this is horrible. And I talked you through it. Like, you could have easily just got so scared and never done it again. But you got to workshop it with other people that get it and that really, really respect, love the work that you do. And also in that, because we've had all of these programmings for so long where we've externalized everything, we're like, what if I get it wrong? But if I have training or I have a degree or I have a certification, then I can hide under that, you know, and this is what the hospitals have done, right? They're not evidence-based, they're insurance-based. Like, you know, if you've worked in the hospital system in birth, you know that they don't work by evidence. They literally are governed by insurance and liability. And so because we've externalized so much of ourselves, we're relying on this like constant, like more training and more like, you know, certified programs. And it's like, a lot of that doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. The most important thing is that we're learning from those that work for us, and got a community who can keep us accountable, so that if we do fuck up, that we can deal with that in a really appropriate way. That when we hold circles, of course, my passion is holding circles. Like, circles are such a healing space, and they can also be a really traumatized space and a really not healing space if they're held from the place of somebody who isn't connected to a community, who isn't being, who literally has that program so embedded on an unconscious level that what they want to do is fix people. You know, if they're externalizing everything, then they want to like help others heal, instead of the intention being that they want that they just want to hold the space for people to like find the answers themselves. And this is the difference between therapy. It's why like circles are better than therapy in many ways, great, but they're not therapy, because therapy is like you and another person. This is like being able to witness others and you being able to find the answers within yourself. So community is, we've got to come back to community. But if we're so afraid of being with other women and we're afraid of women judging us, this is what I see a lot, is space holders not mentors and accountability communities and masterminds and things like that, because they're afraid of being judged. They're afraid of all that trauma that they've experienced with other women, but it leaves them open to not practicing ethically, because we can only see what we can see, right? We can't see past our own stuff. So if you're not constantly growing in those spaces, and that doesn't mean just more training and more certification, because you're just hiding under more training and certification. Yes. Anyway, that's my big rant. I'm just going to read some of these. Do you have anything to add?
No, yeah, just so you know, like Catherine, you talk a lot about like the tend and befriend, like nervous system response, like which, like if we go way back, is like our blueprint, but we can't get to tend and befriend until we address these sisterhood / witch wounds, because we can't feel safe with other women. Like so then it's about going back to yourself and reconnecting with yourself and feeling safe with yourself and working through your own witch wounds and sisterhood wounds, and noticing where you hold, or where you jump to judgment, where you jump to vilification, where you project, where you're not kind of willing to like sit and turn it in and look. And like, this is never ending work. Like, I still have witch wound, sisterhood wound stuff pop up in my life all the time. Like, we're not going to undo programming. Did I just cut out?
No, you're good.
Okay. We're not going to undo, millennia of programming in like, you know, a couple of weeks or like even a year. It's going to take a lifetime for us to continue working through this stuff. But once you scratch the tip of the iceberg and you can start to like pin the patterns and notice the hooks and see when stuff pops up, and it's like, hang on a minute, instead of like falling into the spiral, you have the awareness and you're like, that's that old cheeky sisterhood wound coming out, rearing its head. Let's kind of stop and look at this. And when you start doing that work, you can connect on such a deeper, so much more authentic level, and you feel safe to be vulnerable and brave within spaces and within women that you're close to, because like we all feel and hold this stuff, you know, and it doesn't make us weak or silly or you know, like a pathetic little girl, or like it makes us human, and like our souls chose to incarnate at this time, and this is part of the work that we're here to do, and our medicine is needed right now. So like we need to start working through this stuff so that we can get our magic out into the world to more people.
Yes. Wild moonstone alchemy, you're like, you said you're hearing the voices in your head. Yes, the world needs your medicine. Like the world needs us to do up, but this fear can really be so paralyzing. And I think the biggest thing is like embracing our human. Like no matter how much healing you're going to do, right? We're still going to find that judgment creeps into our mind. We're still going to find that sometimes we find ourselves talking about people, maybe, you know, like that's what makes us human. And it's our responsibility to then acknowledge these patterns and acknowledge like, oh, I can see where it's showing up, and then how can I take responsibility for that? I can see that me being judgmental or jealous of that person is actually me wanting to move more energy, wanting to do something myself, or not feeling able or whatever. Like it's actually my responsibility to do that, and to really embrace the full experience of being a human being. And this is where like, yeah, the tend and befriend. So tend and befriend is like a stress response. So when we talk about fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn, women have this innate desire to tend and befriend with other women because our oxytocin becomes shared. We co-regulate together. This is why our menstrual cycles can sync together, because that's really how we are the most powerful, which is why they targeted women to separate women in the first place, because when you separate women, you really crack this big power force of united people. And so this is why as we can come back together, we create this whole other ripple effect. And the more women that do, the more women unite together. Like as I rise, you rise. As you rise, I rise. As I see the power in you see the power in myself. Like that's how it works. It's like inside, outside. But yeah, it has to begin within us first, because as circle facilitators, we can't create safe spaces because that doesn't exist. We can create that, how did we put it last time? We said it in our last live, but it's like we create this
container. So like it's up to us to hold an ethical, safe container. Yeah. But we can't guarantee safety for the individual, because like we all hold completely different triggers depending on our like life to date, depending on our past life stuff that's going to come in, depending on our ancestral stuff, depending on so many things. But we can do our utmost to create an ethical, safe container within which the circle takes place. That's
our responsibility to work on our own stuff as well. And the thing is, you won't always know sometimes when you step into a circle what's going to suddenly make you feel unsafe. Like you didn't, Erin, you didn't know when you went to the hospital that suddenly you're going to wave of like panic. Like we don't always know when that's going to be triggered. And I know I studied midwifery for a little while, worked as a doula, and I worked in for a long time, and I have never experienced the level of bitchiness and hierarchical, nasty behavior from women ever in my life than in birth work. It shocked me. I was like, this is such a beautiful space, birth women and it was horrendous. And I've been like, it traumatized me, and I like left pretty quickly after that and was like, right, I need to do something to support this. And this is why you can't just go to a circle and think that automatically things shift. You know, like it might shift massively, but it's about going really slowly and gently, taking time to reflect and really connecting with your body and how your body feels, because often we have this pattern to just disassociate and abandon ourselves. And so going to a circle, you might just abandon your needs, or, you know, to fit in with the crowd rather than being authentic. Doing that kind of consistently and feeling into that and making slight tweaks and changes, that's where you're going to notice differences. It's like, how can I show up today in a way that feels really authentic without completely sending myself out of range? You know, like, how can I do enough that feels just enough that I'm stretching, but not so much that I'm going to go into paralysis? And I think this is where I think circles and ongoing journeys and containers really make that difference. Yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's the long game. It's the slow long game, and it's really bringing it back to basics and just like getting on the mat every day. And like I said before, like it starts with us, and it starts with reconnecting to ourselves. And another thing just popped up, and it's popped up a few times, so I'm just going to say it. I think it's in one of Naomi Wolf's books. What's her book called? Is it The Beauty Myth?
No, you're thinking about vagina. I'm sure you're thinking about.
Yes, I am. And
because that's a good.
It's a brilliant book. Yeah, Vagina by Naomi Wolf, and she talks about, you know, how like the biggest power or the quickest way to bring a society down is by disconnecting the women from first themselves and then each other, and creating this like divide. And I mean, she spoke about a war, I think somewhere in Africa, and the war chief gave instructions to his soldiers to go into these villages and rape the women, but not with their bodies, with it's pretty horrific, with tools that would give them permanent damage, like permanently damage their vaginas, so that they felt unclean, dirty, completely damaged, but so that they actually like remained alive, because that was once he did that to the women, the whole community collapsed, right? So it's getting on the mat every day, and it's doing really slow and gentle reconnection practices to yourself, like with yourself, loving yourself with your own body, before you can like even start out there.
Mm-hmm. And that isn't so because a lot of spiritual communities I see as well do these daily spiritual practices, but they're so regimented and so dogmatic that they're actually not in the process of it. They're doing it because they think they have to do it,
and they're doing it in a disassociated way. Completely. They're not in their bodies.
And this idea of like being transcending and being more enlightened, we're really needing to come like back to the earth. We need to like bury. This is why I teach like closings. Like we actually need to bury ourselves and like reconnect, because they disconnected us from our bodies, from ourselves, from each other, and from the earth. Sorry, I think someone was trying to call me. I didn't put it on focus like I should have. But that part of that book was like next level, because when you think about it, that's what happened a lot to a lot of women, and that's what a lot of women are carrying in their cells and in their wombs still today. And it caused like a lot of brain damage as well, like not brain damage but like brain changes that affected their abilities to parent, their ability to like be part of the community. So you can see this stuff is so sinister, and so going slowly and gently is the most important thing, and finding a level of trust with other women again, because if you're disconnected from your body, then you can't always feel when something is wrong, you know. Whereas if you're really back in your body, then you can go, actually, it's not me, it's that this relationship with this person is not right for me, and I'm going to try again, rather than there's something wrong with me, this relationship made me feel uncomfortable, and so I'm just going to give up because women just suck, you know. It's about, yeah, getting on the mat every day and just low small things that can get us back in our bodies, and find communities that feel good in our bodies. And so those mummy war stuff, you know, and also just being able to speak up and be authentic, and be able to hold any shame that arises or any fear that arises from that, and own our authenticity regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finding the openings, and like going towards the openings, and, you know, like you're gonna get triggered and you're gonna contract and you're gonna shut down. That's fine, because, you know, we're constantly doing this, but just, yeah, like going really slowly and finding the openings, and just looking out for those patterns and when they pop up. And like I've said multiple times, like you're going to notice the patterns within yourself first. Well, that's where you should be starting, is noticing the patterns within yourself first, and then you'll start to see them out there. And then again, when you see them out there, it's not judging them, it's just noticing them and being like, that's that thing.
And noticing them in others is also often actually a mirror to notice it in ourselves. You know, like, oh, I can see, you know, judging somebody else is actually usually an opportunity to see something within ourselves.
Yeah. And, you know, like once you've, like, I used to be that person who was like, oh, I just get along better with guys. Like, I just always have. That's just my thing. But, you know, over the past kind of 15 years, I've really done a lot of deep work in healing sisterhood and witch wounds. And now I have this, you know, we have this community of women where we can be 100% authentic. We can have hard conversations. We can have them respectfully. We can, like, because it's always just like there's an underlining tone of like love and compassion. And you pull me up all the time. Like I pull you up all the time, but we do it from a really grounded, rooted, non-judgmental space, just a space of noticing. And so we just reflect back to each other, and we don't have to worry so much about, you know, oh, I'm going to trigger them if I say that, or they're going to think I'm a bitch, or because like we've done a lot of work on that to remove that. And when you are lucky enough to find yourself in a community of women like that, the lifting up of each other, and the, you know, the community feeling, and the knowing that you all have your back no matter what, and noticing what you can do together as opposed to on your own state of hyper independence, which is just a trauma response, is like the biggest gift. And it is honestly what is going to change the world. I truly believe that.
Yes, yes. When you felt it, when you have felt that level of kind of trust, I could not imagine my life or my work without having people who have my back, who support me, who can call me out on stuff in a really compassionate, kind way. Because I really, and the thing is, I really like trust myself and the work that I do. And I'm a human and I fuck up sometimes, and I need somebody to like see it from a different perspective. And I trust that, you know, you see me in my wholeness and I see you in your wholeness, and same with our entire community. This is why I create containers where we can do that. But it really starts with like it's inside work. Because if you're really quick to feel shame and then the shame paralyzes you, it's difficult to be open to anything. So quick to think, you know, to want to be at all costs and not ever be, never feel like you've done something wrong. It's very tricky, and you don't allow yourself the full experience of expanding, because that's what we do. We spiral like the earth. We're not linear like we're programmed to think we are, that we just keep growing and growing and growing and growing, and we're just here to achieve. We spiral, we go inwards, we come outwards, we go inwards, we come outwards, and we're just humans doing this messy human thing, and we need each other. And I think that really is, we need each other for co-regulation, and that's how our kids learn. Well, when we're regulated, then our kids learn. I reckon we're going to run out of time in a little minute. There's so much more that we could say and talk about. If anyone has any questions, feel free.
Lotus just said, yeah, knowing that you have people who have your back no matter what makes such a difference. We need that. That's like, it's everything. And it's knowing that because like Catherine said, like we all have blind spots, like we're human, we're going to fuck up, but being able to go to your people and say, I've fucked up, I need your holding and your advice at the moment, and know that they're just that they're going to give you love and reflective questions to help you on your path, but not judge you, is the biggest thing. Because judgment just creates shame, which constricts us, which keeps us in this like murky blur, and it's just like completely useless.
It doesn't let us live a full experience. It doesn't let us serve the way we're meant to. It's not nice. And I guess the thing is, we don't just want people that have our back that are going to tell us what we want to hear either. Like, we want people that are willing to like have those uncomfortable conversations, that their nervous system is regulated enough they can actually hold discomfort as well, and that you can too. Because, you know, you said before, like, find the opening, because often we just like, it feels safe to be in constriction. Like, it feels safe for a lot of people to stay at that space of like smallness. And like, sometimes we just need to give ourselves whatever it is that we need without the shame. And it's unraveling all of that shame and that fear, and they're the big things. And none of this happens overnight. It's all like a lifelong journey as we move closer and closer to the earth. Yeah, it's a life thing.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, you know, like, we've talked about like doing the work like on your own and getting on the mat every day, and having those like fluid daily practices, and, you know, of reconnection and unnumbing within yourself. And that is best done in community, which is like one of Catherine and my biggest passions, is creating communities. And we're just in the process of reconfiguring and rebirthing our rhythm and flow container, which is going to be rebirthed in a different form really soon. And that's where all this stuff happens.
Yeah,
where you reconnect to yourself, but in community.
Because we can, so many women are yearning for community, but are also really afraid of community. And with community comes uncomfortable conversations. And so I think when you're feeling afraid of being in those spaces, then it's important to be in a space that someone else is holding, that you know that you can trust them and that they can hold the space for whatever discomfort or whatever. The other thing I was going to say is, we can't always be uncomfortable. Sometimes it needs to be play and fun. We can't integrate without fun and play. Like, all of our ancestors that just struggled, like, play for them, you know, we need to play for all the times that they missed out on fun. Like, you've got to integrate with fun. So these are the kinds of containers that we're really, really passionate about creating. So I'm just going to say it's called Returning, because we're going to be returning around the wheel, and it is going to come soon. That's going to be a community that we're going to hold. And this is where you can learn more about all of this stuff. This is the foundation, like Sisterhood stuff, Witch Rune stuff, HERstory, that, and the retreat that we're running in April, at the beginning of April in Adelaide, where you can learn how to hold space for others from an embodied, ethical place. It's going to be so beautiful, because it's going to be in person and such an embodied, immersive experience. Like, in person is just, it's so freaking fun. And everyone gets access to my online circle medicine program, as well as my business live online event that I'm going to run, and access to Returning as well when we release. So if you're interested in learning more about this Sisterhood stuff, and getting yourself out there, reconnecting with yourself, with others, with the earth, like we're all really yearning to do. They're going to be affordable. Like we're really trying to make them as accessible as possible. It's difficult to hold space for others if you don't have that real connection and ongoing practice and journey for yourself. So we're really big on that. So if you have a business and you want some support in that way, then I also have embodied space holder, mastermind and mentorship, and one-on-one support. And Erin and I both do in-person and distance, whatever we call it, energy work, alchemy, healing portals, that we offer as well. So there's lots of different layers to it, and I think sometimes a bit of everything. We run closed circles too, but they're fully sold out. So if you're interested in closed circles in Adelaide, you can join the wait list for next year. So lots of things, but the retreat is happening. Returning is coming. Someone mentioned books, I think, before. So just quickly,
we've got a whole like recommended reading list in returning.
You mentioned vagina, and I would just say, like, Jane Hardwick Collins's HERstory is probably the best starting point. Such a wonderful, wise woman in the community, and that's what she teaches a lot. They're probably the main things to start with, but we have like little books, reading lists, and we talk about it a lot in our. I also did a reel on books. If you go into my reels, there's a whole reel on various books about HERstory. Okay, I reckon we're going to get cut off any second, but I hope everyone enjoyed that. I am going to upload them to my YouTube, and I'll go onto my wall as well. So there's lots and lots of free resources, and we will be back in a night for Monday Musing. Have a beautiful day.
Yeah.